Hey there, my name is Tyler Hakes. I'm the Principal and Strategy Director at Optimist. Thank you so much for joining us today for our workshop. I'm super pumped. We have a live workshop today with Brittany Berger. She's going to be sharing some best practices on repurposing content. And she's going to be sharing with us some ideas and practical tips around the middle and the bottom of the funnel, especially, which is I know a really challenging space, I think, for a lot of content marketers and a lot of folks in content marketing. So I think it'll be just an amazing presentation here. I think we're going to learn a lot from Brittany. Before we get started, I just have a few little mandatory shameless plugs for the crew. So first of all, Optimist runs a growth-focused community for content marketing, inbound, and SEO folks. It's called Top of the Funnel, and we have workshops just like this. We host live Q&As. We share job and work opportunities, questions and articles, and just all kinds of great stuff in there. We just crossed the 400 member mark, so we're just continuing to grow that. And yeah, we'd love to have you join. So if you're interested, check it out. It's a free Slack community, so you can join it at YesOptimist, YesOptimist.com/tofu, TOFU. Head on over and you can sign up and join there. Like I said, we've got a bunch of workshops and live Q&As and other programming coming up over the next couple of months. And so likewise, I'd encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel here and stay up to date as we publish more of these and have more coming up over the next few months. Really appreciate your support. Cool. Well, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring on Brittany, our guest for today. All right. Hey, Brittany, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I am doing pretty well. Thank you. Thank you. First of all, thanks so much again for being with us today. I'm super excited about this workshop. I know I have a lot to learn around content repurposing, and I think it'll be super valuable to have your expertise. How did you kind of get first interested in content repurposing as like a process?
I'm going to talk about this a little bit more when I open my slides, but basically just the times in my life when I had a lot going on and couldn't really put the focus that I was used to into my job and content creation. And, there would be times when I would go to work and I wouldn't have it in me to create new content. I still had to drive traffic. I still had to drive results. And so I would get creative. And then I would realize, this works well, sometimes even better than creating new content in the first place. And so I just really started leaning into it. And yeah, like I told you earlier, I like calling it being strategically lazy. I like to say that I have really big goals, but I'm also not willing to do any more work than necessary to get there. And yeah, that's kind of the origin story.
I love it. And so real quick before we get started, I know you've got a ton of stuff going on between you're working as a consultant and you've got like your community and some courses and stuff. Do you want to share a little bit about that with folks and kind of just your background and kind of what you're working on?
Yeah, sure. So my kind of home for content marketing is BrittanyBerger.com. It's just devoted to all things helping you get more results with less content. Things like repurposing, updating old content, just creating better and more strategic content in the first place. So all of that, again, helping you be strategically lazy too. And I also, I have a community and digital media company, Work Brighter, and that is kind of the home of the strategic laziness mindset, where it's just kind of talking about different takes on productivity and work-life balance and stuff like that. And that was originally started as a blog to really just help me figure out content marketing stuff. I originally started that blog to learn stuff and apply it to my day jobs and client work. And it just kind of took on a life of its own from there.
Awesome. Yeah. And I can vouch. I did snag your Notion course. I've been trying to dip my toes into some new tools, and Notion was one I was really interested in. So
Notion is amazing. That tool has been very, very, I hesitate to say life-changing about a tool, but yes.
Yeah, it really is cool. And I think like to that ethos of sort of being strategically lazy, like it does so much stuff that you have to rely on other tools to do. Like that's the thing that's really interesting to me, is like I can just kind of do everything in one place, which makes your life a lot easier.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'll stop jabbering away here. Are you ready to kick off with the main show here?
Yeah, I'll switch over to my slides.
Cool. Let me add this to the stream here, and cool. All right. So first of all, for everyone watching today, feel free as we're going through here. If you have any questions or anything for Brittany, feel free to put them in the chat here. We'll definitely try to have some Q&A time at the end. And if there's anything that's sort of pertinent as we're going through it, I'll try to jump in with any specific questions or anything as we're going through things.
All right, cool. So, like I said, we're talking about remixing and repurposing at the bottom of the funnel and the middle. I am Brittany. I like to call myself content DJ, since, I like to think of content repurposing and remixing as like remixing, remastering, all the stuff that good DJs do. And I just love talking. My whole thing and my approach to content marketing is very much inspired by pop culture and the entertainment industry. So content DJ, and on most social media, I am that Berger. And like I said, we're going to talk more about my story, and I want to take you down two kind of parallel paths, my career and then what was going on in the rest of my life at that point in my career. So I first got started in content marketing. I got hired part-time after a summer internship when I was still in my senior year of college. So that was my part-time job. And then I was also a full-time student, juggling it with a full course load. I was in lots of extracurriculars. This picture is from a sorority superlative thing. I was in, the Public Relations Society, lots of stuff. So I, didn't always have the most time for my work there. I was the only content marketer. And I was only working in their office about 12 hours a week. So, had to get creative. Yeah. Then once I graduated from college, I went full time at that company, but not before getting ankle surgery, reconstruction, and the overall recovery for that, between the actual recovery, leaving work early to go to physical therapy, fixing a hip injury I got from being on crutches so long. So it was like years. So that was about two years until I kind of felt like that was no longer taking up my time. And again, most of that time I was the only content marketer at the company. Wow. So had to figure out how to get the job done while still managing this other important stuff in my life. And then again, I forgot to change the picture there. So after that company, I worked at Mention.com in New York City. And really when they started scaling, that was the first time I really wasn't the only one creating content and using content, but I was also managing the team side of things. And I was also going through really bad burnout around that time, trying to get multiple chronic illnesses and disabilities kind of definitively diagnosed and figured out. So, I was at the point that I decided I needed to leave my full-time job. I was in the hospital about once a month. And so that really impacted the way that I could do my work, obviously. Yeah. And then eventually I was like, you know what, full-time work isn't really gonna work for this health stuff. So I went out on my own to focus on my health. And what I said at the time was that self-care was my side hustle. My health was first, way before, like, my physical health first, my mental health second, my job third. And so again, I still, I had big goals for my own brand and my own business, but in the 3 years now that I've been full-time, I rarely work a full 40-hour week, just since that's not what my body is capable of anymore now that I understand its needs and how to manage my health. And so I've learned that I really can't work as much as a lot of other people can and do. We're in this kind of like hustle culture era right now where so many other content marketers are putting in like 60-hour weeks and stuff like that. And I, was trying to keep up, but I couldn't work that much and I couldn't create that much. And repurposing helped me kind of make it seem like I was doing more than I was.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. So, I've never been able to put, 150% into my work, but I had goals that, would have required that if I didn't figure out something else. So I did. And it's what I like to call minimalist content marketing. And we'll talk about why it's called minimalist in a sec. But overall, it's just an approach to content marketing that doesn't prioritize content creation, like I've kind of alluded to already. That's really, for most people, the most draining, time-consuming, energy-consuming part of content marketing. And so we want to think about ways to be able to do less of that. And so for most of the time that I've been in the industry, that I've been a content marketer, the focus of content marketing has really been on publishing new stuff. The goal is to be able to produce as much as possible. And I like to call this more cowbell content strategy. Again, the pop culture coming in here from the SNL sketch, because marketers just kind of treat things like, no matter the problem, like I got a fever and the only prescription is more content.
Right.
Yeah. Let me just take a sip of my drink real quick.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is the approach that we've been taking to content marketing for like 10 years now. And it has led to like an internet full of too much content, too much noise. It creates content shock for our customers and our audience. I love that term from Mark Schaefer. I feel like my approach to marketing kind of started to change with reading his post about that. Producing content shock for our customers leads to content fatigue and literal physical burnout for us marketers. And it's just not helping anyone. And so we've really got to lean away from that more cowbell content marketing towards this, pop culture inspired content marketing, or this minimalist content marketing. And so there are three main rules of the minimalist content marketing framework or approach, or whatever you want to call it. The first is where the minimalist term comes from. It's define your enough. I can't say that I identify as a minimalist or an essentialist or anything like that. I read the books and I kind of took what I needed to. But one of those things was the concept of defining your enough. The minimalism and essentialist movements really put a big focus on defining how much stuff you really need, instead of having like an endless drive for more. And that can really be applied to our marketing in addition to, our overall lives and our content.
Mm-hmm. Are you going to dig into that a little bit more about how you define that?
I absolutely can. Yeah, it depends really it depends on so much on the business, how much content you already have that you can repurpose, how much versus how much you need to create. It depends on your target personas. But really, any number, just having a number to work towards is great, rather than the infinity that you're otherwise signing up for when you decide to publish blog posts twice a week or something like that.
Right.
So even if it's not a hard number, and even if it's something like, all right, we're going to spend 5 months publishing new content and then take a 2-month break to take a break or something like that. But just stop the quest for more. And only create content that you really need. Like if you're reaching for blog topics or content topics, and if you're reaching for relevancy and something if it's not immediately clear how a certain piece of content fits into your overall strategy and business goals, then that is not really a necessary piece of content. And if you don't have more important pieces of content, you've reached your enough.
Yeah, that's interesting. We kind of take a little bit of that approach with some of our clients, where we will we kind of know what like the foundation of content that they need would be. So like a lot of times, our clients are coming to us and they have like nothing, and so they're kind of starting from scratch. And so we need to say, okay, here are the content topics that we know are most relevant, that we want to own and sort of have like an evergreen value. And that's kind of like the foundation. And then anything beyond that, a lot of times is like, okay, maybe there is a need for ongoing content creation for, timely topics or something that's changing in the industry. But once we have that foundation, it's really about like supporting that core content. So to your point.
Yeah, it's just like when you need content, create it. When the approach that I take to content planning is first to like look at the business goals that you're working towards for the next quarter or something, and then thinking about what content do we need to reach that. Like what do customers need to know, and what content topics are going to address that, and then just thinking really about what customers need for the goals, and just not endlessly creating, not trying to pull topics out of nowhere just to have published something, because your energy is going to be spent doing other areas of content marketing at that point.
Yeah.
There's so much else to do. And if you already have this other content, if you've already created the content you need, then you can focus just on getting that to the right people. So that leads to rule 2, which is create just as much content as you need. Create just the topics or the talking points that you've identified people need to know for you to do whatever your campaigns or your marketing goals are focused on, and then stop. There's so much more to content marketing other than creating content. You don't need to be publishing blog posts weekly for years and years without a break. Because if it takes that much content to like fuel your funnel and your marketing goals, you need to revisit your strategy. It shouldn't take that much content. So stop creating content and revisit the strategy. Or if the content that you have is working, stop creating new content. And instead of creating new content that would just drown out that good stuff, focus on expanding its reach and remixing it and repurposing it and stuff like that. Which leads me to rule 3. So once you have the content that you need, instead of just, again, drowning it out with topics that are less relevant to your product or your customer or your actual business, and just reaching for things people might be interested in, instead shift your focus and the way that you're spending your time at work to things like remixing and repurposing and optimizing your content and the content that you already have instead, until it is giving you the results that you need.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I'll say one thing too that we run into a lot with our clients, because we sort of walk the line between content marketing and SEO, is that a lot of folks who have fallen into this trap, they have created so much content that they're actually competing with themselves in search results, and it's actually hurting their overall outcomes, because they've got 6 blog posts about the same topic because they felt the need to just keep making stuff.
Exactly. And another way that it can actually be detrimental is if you start creating content around topics that aren't as strategic and relevant to what you're working on, and then that content ranks well, you could end up bringing a ton of bad fit traffic to your website, which really does nothing. That was actually a problem that we had in my time at Mention, not necessarily because it wasn't strategic at first. It was, it was created with a purpose at the beginning, but then, their audience changed. They went up market, a customer persona changed. And we had this post that was bringing so much traffic. It was ridiculous, but it was no one who read that post stuck around. No one who read that post was like, it did absolutely nothing. And so it was really impressive to have that ranking, but it did absolutely nothing. And we struggled to find ways to make it work for us. It was about development, even though we were a social media company, because it was a post from our product team back from when the blog was more focused on, sharing the company's stories and what they were working on. And that was when the company was really focused on like recruiting. And so it was focused, it was bringing a lot of like developers and stuff like that. And so we ended up kind of trying to turn that into a mini funnel for recruiting and hiring, instead of promoting a call to action for like a lead magnet on that page, like promoting the jobs page and stuff like that. And so eventually we did figure out a way to make that, work a little bit. But again, if you create content or if you have content on your site, that's no longer serving your business goals, it can actually be making your life harder.
100%. Yeah. I think probably the most salient element there, at least to me, is just it comes back to the most foundational thing for us, which is like have a goal for everything that you make.
Exactly.
It has to roll up into some kind of strategy. Otherwise, like, why are you making it in the first place?
Yeah. And I know that before we were recording, or maybe this was on the beginning of the call, but we were talking about Notion. And one of the things I love about like Notion and Airtable and all of the different relational database tools is that when I started using them for content calendars, it really, the relations force you to always think back. So something that I do in like any content marketing spreadsheet that I make is, I have relations to the goals. And if I'm looking at a piece of content and I can't, pinpoint which goal in the database it should be connected to, that is a sign to me that says, okay, is this something that I really need?
Totally. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so, yeah, like I said before, it all kind of is really inspired by the pop culture and entertainment industry because the way that I see it, their product is content. An album of music is content, a movie is content. And since it is their product, they have a very direct ROI from getting more bang for their buck out of a piece of content that the industry creates. Like remixing a song that's already been recorded or something like that. And yeah, it's really a great place to look for inspiration. And so that really direct focus kind of shows the problem with most content repurposing in that as amazing as repurposing is, the rule 3 of the methodology only works when it follows rule 1 and 2, namely strategy, number 1. But a lot of repurposing is honestly not done very strategically. So one of the most common repurposing tactics is taking blog posts and repurposing them on social media. And this is what I call repurposing up funnel. Blogs already tend to be top of funnel content. And then you move it over to social media, which is like even more top of funnel content. And so it's all about, so that type of repurposing extends your content funnel farther, like up or out, or whichever way you're visualizing the funnel. And that's not necessarily a problem if that's what you need. If you know that your funnel converts audience and traffic into customers at like a really great rate, then yeah, you do want to focus on just going up and out and expanding a wider reach. But that's not the case for most companies. It's really not. Most people are more likely to be publishing a blog post twice a week and a video once a week and repurposing all of that into 25 social media posts. Meanwhile, they don't have anything that gets the blog readers onto their email list, or they don't have like updated mechanisms or sequences to turn email subscribers into customers. And so there's so much focus on that repurposing up funnel when, like you said, for a lot of content marketers, middle and bottom of the funnel is difficult for us. And repurposing is a way to make it easier, but most of us just ignore that and keep going up further and further, which then makes bottom of the funnel harder again. And so it's kind of like a cycle where we're not focusing enough on bottom of the funnel. And so then conversions there become really difficult. And it's just like a self-fulfilling prophecy, I think is the term. So to talk more about content at the bottom of the funnel, in most cases, that ends up building a big brand audience that you can't convert. And so if you come into the rule of two, and you always make sure that strategy comes first and you align with the overall business goals, once you get to repurposing, you'll be sure to focus on the part of the funnel that needs TLC the most. And that in most cases that I've worked with, in most cases in my own time, like working in-house, that is the middle and the bottom of the funnel. It's the nurturing and conversion. For content marketers, a lot of us are really great at the top of funnel stuff. And this is where we need to focus more. So let's just review the type of content that we're even talking about, what type can be used at the bottom of the funnel. If you want to read more about just overall bottom funnel content strategy, I have a blog post for this on the CoSchedule blog. And if you just Google bottom of the funnel content, you can find it. And it goes more into stuff like this, but stuff that you can use. The same content formats as the top of the funnel, like blog posts and videos and podcast episodes, still work at the bottom of the funnel. They'd just be about different topics and talking to different people. Case studies and customer interviews and success stories are all really, really powerful bottom of the funnel content. They give the audience really any type of user generated content in general. So this is also like interviews, guest posts from customers, stuff like that. It gives prospects someone to relate to that's not you. You know, like they're going to have more in common with your other customers than with you. And so if you can just pass the mic over to them, that can work out really great. And another thing is that if you're not great at bottom of the funnel content, case studies, UGC, stuff like that, you're not necessarily creating it, you're just kind of orchestrating it. So that's another plus there.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff that's not necessarily considered content, but things like feature pages. If you create landing pages for SEO about like specific product features or use cases and other types of landing pages like that. Another thing that I haven't really seen done, but I think it'd be so great is the alternatives pages that people make for SEO, where it's like your product versus competitor. That could be such a great like email at the bottom of the funnel, or social media posts for people who follow you on social media but don't know the difference between you and your competitor.
Right.
And so that can be really great. That type of content tends to just sit somewhere sort of hidden on websites, and a lot of times for a lot of companies, like sometimes even the sales team uses it more than the marketing team, just like sales decks and white paper reports. So all of these tools that sometimes aren't even, necessarily considered marketing content and are more sales content, you can still repurpose that and use it in the marketing, and that can be used at the middle and bottom of the funnel. And so can support content. Things like product tutorials and knowledge-based articles and FAQs. Again, they're likely living somewhere on your website that's not super discoverable and usable. Someone has to be like looking for it and really determined to find it to get to it. But you can make that much more easily discoverable and use that to your advantage a lot more. And then finally, product updates. Like this is especially true for software companies. Something that we ran into a lot at Mention was, I would always forget that, people are not paying as much attention to your software as you think or as you hope. And just reminding someone about a new feature or other product update once likely isn't going to be enough. A lot of times product updates are just relegated to like a notification when you log into the app, or like the bottom blurb of a newsletter. And that can be used a lot more. And that can kind of even roll into product marketing campaigns. Like I mentioned, we did a lot of product marketing without necessarily having any dedicated product marketers. It was really just us working more closely with the sales team to repurpose the stuff that they were doing and creating really product-focused campaigns. And so how to remix bottom funnel content. I'm missing a slide. Sorry. I'm just going to go over this really quick. So just those are topics that I just mentioned for bottom of the funnel. And then in terms of formats, for the most part, everything that you can use at the top of the funnel is still relevant, just addressing a different segment of your audience. But what's also really, really important for middle and bottom is email. People are so much more in tune with their inboxes than anywhere else they're communicating with you. So once you have their email address, you really want to use it, and don't be afraid of using it. Webinars also can be really great for FaceTime, especially if there's live Q&As. That can kind of be a simulation sales call type of thing. It can serve the purpose sales calls have. Again, knowledge bases. If you do have a knowledge base or support articles area of your site, and then you repurpose that content elsewhere, link all of that content to each other. Like on the blog post, link to the knowledge base, on the knowledge base, link to the blog post, etc. And then finally, something that we'll talk about, one company that does this great later, but in-app messaging, obviously not the full content, but like if you have any type of app or, you know, any interface that people have and send notifications or even like SMS messaging, obviously not using the full content here, but messages or in-app notifications or tooltips linking to content that can help people. And again, just like using it in your overall business more, and bringing it into the product, into support, into sales. And so, yeah, now here are some more specific ways that we can do that. So the first way that I want to talk about is repurposing case studies, because a lot of companies format and publish case studies or success stories, testimonials, stuff like that. And I'll just say not the most consumable format. Yeah, like they're often PDFs or very short landing pages that, you know, aren't super discoverable. Again, a lot of this content, because it's, you know, usually created for people who are looking for it, it's not super discoverable on our websites either. And so it just, that makes really great content for repurposing and bringing it to a wider audience, making it more shareable. So you can repurpose that for a wider audience and adjust it as necessary. So some ways that you can do that are expanding it and, you know, adding more editorial and more commentary to the customer's point of view to turn into a blog post. And then once you have a blog post about anything, that can be repurposed so much more.
Right.
Yeah. You can also create email content like newsletter sections. I've seen companies do this where they have a regular section in like their monthly newsletter where they feature a customer story. Or you can also create like dedicated emails and drip sequences or other types of campaigns that are just all about, again, passing the mic over someone your prospect can relate to, actually using the case studies that your team has put the time into creating. Right. Yeah. And another great way is that if you have a lot of case studies or testimonials, you can create new pages or content rounding up similar stories and appealing to like a similar target customer, kind of using them as examples in your own content instead of using examples that you just pull from, you know, hypotheticals or something like that. And so one way that we did that at Mention was we had a ton of case studies, and we would group them together by themes like this based on different customer personas, like marketing agencies. And then we would write blog posts about, you know, how agencies can use monitoring. And if you go through this blog post, it features all of our different agency-related case studies and tells a little bit about them. And it obviously links to the full case study.
Yeah, that makes
another thing that you can do. Yeah, it's so great. I know that I really love that. Again, it's also great if you're not super comfortable being more like selling or talking about the product more directly. I know a lot of us content marketers feel that way. We need to get over it. But also, until then, letting a customer kind of do the selling for you is a tactic that I love to use.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think to your point of like the content and the channels is that many companies case studies basically are only discoverable in one way, which is if somebody's already on your site and then like clicks the case studies link in your navigation and like sees your case study, and then usually it's just like, here's the high level outcome and like a quote, and that's it.
Exactly. Yeah. And like someone has to be super interested in your product to go to the case studies page, where they might not be super interested in your product, like talking about the Eugene Schwartz level of awareness. They might not be product aware, but even if they're problem aware or solution aware, they're not going to be looking for case studies of your business, but they might be looking for blog posts about how agencies can use monitoring.
Right. Yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah. So the second thing that you can do, again, this is great for the different levels of awareness, especially for existing customers, is reformatting support content to reach a wider audience and more optimized SEO-friendly content. So support, again, just like case studies, support centers and knowledge bases are usually really created for a very, very specific customer, like someone determined to go looking for the information, like unhappy customer, essentially, if they're looking for support. So it's usually not the most usable or discoverable because it's targeted at people on a mission, which is cool, but there's so many other more people that can benefit from it. So repurposing that can get it in front of people who might not be looking. Like, again, the levels of awareness, solution aware, people who aren't existing customers of yours yet aren't going to go to your knowledge base, but you have information in your knowledge base that might make them want to become a customer. Like a walkthrough of a certain feature, that might be the thing that convinces someone. And so it's really, really great to put that content elsewhere. So some ways that you can do that are expanding the information into blog posts. Those are more, browsable and shareable and discoverable. Another really great tactic, especially for any type of product tutorial, is a video on YouTube. Since tutorials are such a type of content that does well with video, and people are so problem solving focused on YouTube a lot. Like, I know, if I want to fix something these days, that's where I go to search. And so a company that really does this great is Ahrefs. And their videos are all, you almost can't even tell whether they're a tutorial for their software or they're an educational tutorial, because they're both, and they're blended together so seamlessly.
Right.
That, like, this blog post is years old. It's a super in-depth guide. It has, I think, multiple videos embedded within it, and it is essentially taking a lot of how to use their software taken from their support area, and it's got I think tens of thousands of views on YouTube, if not hundreds of thousands. Yeah, and that's just one of their blog posts. They do this a lot, and they do this really well. And they're also a company, while we're talking about them, that does the in-app messaging stuff really well. Because their blog posts are so helpful and beneficial for current customers, and they know this, and they're confident that telling their customers about something like this wouldn't be bothering them. They do put in-app messages in their tool when they have new blog posts. I'm not sure if it's every blog post, but I do know that I get those notifications when I log in.
Yeah, for sure. I think the really interesting thing to me here is that basically what you're doing here is you're taking that support article, which is generally framed through the lens of like the product, and sort of reframing it through the lens of like a user.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is another reason that I like to refer to what I do as content remixing instead of just repurposing, since a lot of people think about repurposing as just like copying and pasting content from one place to another, where, remixing, the best example that I like to use is the original I'm Real by Jennifer Lopez versus the remix with Ja Rule, two completely different songs, except for like one verse. And they were both so popular.
It's taking us back there. I like it.
It's just the best example. And I know that I was young at the time, and it was honestly very confusing to me that they had the same title, but they were so different. I was like, wait, this is a remix of this? What? Taylor, what are you doing to me?
Right.
Yeah, and so that was a very memorable experience for me in understanding remixes, I guess.
For sure. Yeah, I think in this example, it's like especially obvious to me, because I think like the content of this article could probably just as easily be, to your point, like a support piece that's like how to use the Ahrefs Keyword Explorer, right? Like that's the product focused version, and then this is like the user focused version, where it's like, hey, even if you don't know what the Ahrefs Keyword Explorer is, like you still want to know how to do keyword research, and it's almost the same content probably.
Yeah, and how much do you want to bet? Like, I'm not on the inside at the company, but like that before they published this, they already had how to use the Keyword Explorer in their support area, and they referenced that when creating this.
100%. Yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah, I love it. I love their marketing so much.
It works. As far as I can tell.
Yeah. Yep. And then the last way that I want to talk about is just repurposing blog posts. Since I know that I said that it's not great to only repurpose them for social media, but that doesn't mean that you can't do that. You just also want to make sure that you're also taking blog post content further down the funnel. A lot of the blog posts that you're probably creating, even if you're creating them with top of funnel audiences in mind, they can still be used and again remixed, reimagined for other areas of the funnel and just really easily be adapted. And using them as a tool to keep in touch with your customers, to educate them, to nurture people who aren't yet customers, and just really get to people in that consideration phase or, even retention phase, to things that are usually really overlooked in terms of content. And so even just creating a little bit of content for this stuff can make a big impact.
Yep.
And so you can use them as a tool for that, using them in nurture sequences, creating newsletters for existing customers. Like this isn't a formal example, but just this morning in my inbox was an email from a friend of mine who is a freelancer, and she has a monthly newsletter just for her current and past clients.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and so that's really great, and that just popped into my inbox this morning. And then again, the formal example that I pulled for this was the software Access Ally. So I at the beginning of the pandemic, it's kind of how I remember things now. So like around March or early April, I signed up for their webinar and I decided to check out what they were doing. I'm looking at them for the Work Brighter membership. And so I have watched their webinar. I have specifically the webinar I signed up for was about using their software to host memberships. And since then, I have been getting these emails from their founder. And you can see it's all about membership site challenges. And so, the way that it's written, it is a listicle. So I didn't go and look for this on their blog since there's a lot there, but I can guarantee it's there. Just the way that this is written, it's a blog post listicle, but it is in my inbox, and I am someone who is a very warm lead for them right now, and it's brilliant.
Yep.
And and another thing is that if you scroll through this email, there were multiple CTAs to sign up for a free trial. And this is again where the remixing comes in, because I bet on the blog version it was probably a CTA to watch the webinar, but since I'm already on their email list, they know that I'm more interested in their product and that what it can do, and so they're using this content to push me straight to a free trial.
That's an interesting point, which is that even if we imagine content to be force like a certain stage of the funnel, like really it's about who it's going to and what stage of the funnel they're at. And so it can take on different meanings or different contexts depending on that person who's receiving it and how they're getting it.
Exactly. Like they don't necessarily know that, I'm dealing with specific challenges in a membership or anything like that, but they know that I want a membership site.
Right.
Yeah. And so they know that this content is at least going to be relevant enough for me to open it, for me to stay in touch. And these have been weekly emails. Like I said, they have a lot of content, a lot of I think they've been blogging weekly for several years before they stopped. So they are a company that has tons of blog content and eventually stopped publishing new stuff. And I bet that was when something like this was created.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So those were the three main examples that I really loved. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to throw out some general tips for repurposing content strategically, no matter what area of the funnel you're doing it for. In keeping with rule 1, strategy first always, it's really helpful to figure out how you're going to repurpose and remix your content before you even create it. Because this way you can kind of prep for that in advance. For example, when I am writing a new blog post at this point, I know that in the same document where I write the blog post content, I also write the caption for a social media post. I also write how I want to spin the email that I'm going to send about it. If I'm going to tell a story related to the piece of content, then, right in that draft, I'm figuring out what story that is. And stuff like that. So always strategy first, both with creation and repurposing. A second thing is to create a repeatable system or multiple repeatable systems for the workflow that you figure out and for the strategy that you decide on. So this might be, we were talking about Notion. So an example of this is like might be creating a template in your content calendar and, you know, a checklist template for each type of content. So you have a template for blog content, you have a template for setting up a new email funnel or something like that. Just checklists. Checklists are really awesome. The book, The Checklist Manifesto, it proves that checklists literally save lives. That's what I like to say. So it's about how doctors implementing systems, checklist-based systems, actually did save a lot of lives. So yeah, I love that. And then finally, don't forget to track your progress, especially when you have a lot of content. It becomes a thing of what have I created, what needs to be created, what out of what I've been created has been repurposed, what about what's been created but hasn't been repurposed. It's a lot. Spreadsheets, databases, Notion, Airtable, whatever your tool of choice is, track your progress, track what needs to be done and what's already been done.
Yep.
Yeah, and like shameless plug, I do have resources for that on my website. There's a free cheat sheet that will help you figure out the first tip, figuring out repurposing as you create. And then I also have a paid template for Airtable and soon to be Notion as well, where and it is a giant database. It is, I like to call it a repurposing focused editorial calendar. So yeah, it's kind of a content calendar that really focuses on the minimalist content marketing strategy. So there's stuff in there for tracking your distribution, your optimization and updating and repurposing, all of that. And so all of that is just over on my website. Yeah, then that's everything that I had. Let me stop sharing my screen. Yeah.
I can do that for you. Cool. Well, that was amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for that. I mean, I think there's just like so many things that I take away. One thing that really stuck out to me, first of all, was I think that the idea of planning for repurposing from the beginning, it really means like a shift in mindset of, you know, it's not just like I'm writing a blog post and it's going to publish. It's really like building a campaign around that piece, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other interesting thing too was thinking about how, especially at the bottom of the funnel and how that kind of bleeds into like retention. I think a big kind of reckoning that we're going to be having in content marketing over the coming years is how we're attributing value to content. Because I think a lot of people are maybe starting to think about that, but not really measuring it. Like if you repurpose your bottom of the funnel content to existing customers, that might not drive traffic or new signups, but it could improve your customer retention, which is just as valuable from a business perspective.
Yeah.
And so we have to rethink some of those metrics, and I think that's a big part of like as you get serious about repurposing content and using it in these various channels and for different types of customers or prospects. How do you measure that? How do you assess the value of it?
Yeah, that's really difficult, especially since attribution for content marketing is so complicated and kind of subjective in the first place. Right. So normally when I work with clients, how I suggest that they measure it depends on what they're already measuring and what they already define as success. So again, it comes back to the business goals. And again, it's just also helpful to, have multiple milestone metrics, and tracking not just traffic and not just customers, but like the different milestones. So you can kind of see how people move through. Mm-hmm. But yeah, content marketing attribution is I'm not going to touch that.
That's a whole other.
That's not my lane.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, first of all, if anyone in the audience has any additional questions for Brittany, please feel free to throw them in to the chat here. So we did have a question from Jade. She was saying, is there an agency or a type of person that you can hire to come in and curate your content for remixing or repurposing and optimizing, which, Brittany, if I'm not mistaken, might be your expertise?
Yeah, so I don't repurpose for you. Yeah, I don't know if there are agencies that do that, but I do know that there are virtual assistants and marketing assistants that do specialize in helping you distribute your content. And I guess like a social, I guess it would just, again, it comes back to incorporating repurposing into your overall marketing. And
Right.
so it would be about, if you're using a social media agency for your social media, they would likely be the people that are repurposing your different areas of content for social media. So again, it's about really not tacking on repurposing as a separate thing, but integrating it into your overall process and workflow. So for example, if you were using an agency to create the content, you would also want them to be crafting the email copy or the social media copy or something like that. And so what I do is I work with people who either have a VA that can then do the implementation, like the scheduling and stuff like that, or people with teams in-house that can then do the actual repurposing. And what I work with people on is digging into, what their overall goals are, what content they have, what content they need, and creating calendars and plans and workflows that do make the shift for them from just content creation to overall repurposing. So for example, we'll like plan out when they're going to update or repurpose an older blog post and how they're going to update it and stuff like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have kind of like a standard process or like a series of steps that you go through if a new client comes to you and they're like, hey, we've got 500 blog posts or whatever, and we want your help in kind of figuring out our repurposing strategy? Yeah, do you have kind of an established process there that you go through?
Yeah, it's actually pretty rare that I take a client through the whole process because they rarely need, it's like a kind of 5 different stages. People rarely need all 5 stages at, kind of the same time. So it's usually about, looking at what they already have going on and figuring out what they need to focus on. So for example, a content or a company that hasn't been doing content as long or that has recently made really big shifts in their overall product or targeting or content, like any company that's made big shifts recently, they're going to have a lot of new content that they do need to create. And so they're going to be focusing on like the phases 1 and 2 that are more focusing on building the audience. Whereas a company with a lot of blog content and a big social media audience, but like no email list, I run into that a lot. So the primary thing for them, we might like skip to the end of the process and just focus on, so it's normally about like I kind of look at it like a map and figuring out where people are now versus taking them through the whole start to finish.
That makes a ton of sense. I think that's another just like interesting thing about content marketing too, is it's like nobody builds like all of their channels at one time, right? Like you kind of get leverage in one place, and then you have to use that as leverage to kind of build your other stuff. So if maybe you're really killing it on Twitter, and then you leverage that to start to grow your email list, and then you get a big email list, and then you use that to build whatever the other channel or something like that, right?
Exactly, all about snowball effects.
Yeah, totally, that makes sense. So Ryan wants to know about tools that you use for distribution. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure thing. So the tools that I use regularly are just Buffer and Meet Edgar and my email list. So I really like to keep it simple. I just use for when I'm doing promoting and distributing more new content, I like to schedule that in advance. So right after I publish a post, I bulk schedule all of the social media at once for the upcoming month or so in Buffer. And then I also add that same content to Meet Edgar for recycling longer term, for putting it in that social media library. And again, I am part of the work brighter ethos is that the best tool is the one you use. So whatever tools work for you, just keep it simple. But I just have a short-term social media scheduling tool, a long-term social media automation tool, and email list. Some other tools might be if you want to do outreach, might be an outreach tool that lets you create templates easily. and stuff like that. I would say the more important tool would be the one that you're using for your workflow. And again, it doesn't matter which tool it is, but it's how you have it set up to be able to, do this all really easily and seamlessly. Just some other tools that come in handy, but aren't necessarily for distribution, but that are helpful for repurposing is that, I really love Capwing, the video editing tool. It's really focused on social media video. And so you can paste in the URL of a YouTube video and immediately really easily repurpose it into the kind of meme Instagram live video and stuff like that. Nice. So that's really easy. I am not good at video editing. It's probably my least favorite part of the types of content that I personally do. And so Capwing makes that a lot easier. And again, Airtable and Notion, just the way that they have their databases are relational. So you can really always make sure that things are connected to the bigger picture because you can literally make that connection in the tool.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes a ton of sense. Yeah, I think that's such a critical piece of this whole thing is just the consistency and the kind of sticking with it, right? Because it's easy to get kind of lost in the process of trying to shuffle all these things around and repurpose this in 20 ways and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I feel like having a lot of public figures like Gary Vee have just given marketers of smaller businesses a really inaccurate picture of repurposing because first of all, he's a different business model. The content that he creates is not content marketing for VaynerMedia. It is content for his own personal media company. So again, it's in the entertainment industry where the content is the product. Right. It's just a totally different business model, but it's look at, just because it's working for someone else and someone else's business model doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And so, his personal brand doesn't have a funnel for selling products. And so he can just focus on all of the up funnel stuff and creating 30 social media posts a day. That's right for him. That's strategic for him, but that's not going to be strategic for 99% of businesses. But a lot of marketers get their idea of what repurposing is from him, from his advice. And so it's just think about who the advice is applicable to.
Hence why I think so many marketers kind of roll their eyes these days when you mention Gary Vee.
Oh yeah, I'm being very nice to him for me right now.
Well, on that point, Brittany, do you have any off the top of your head companies or maybe even individual marketers who are you think do a really great job of repurposing that we can learn from? Yeah,
definitely Ahrefs. They do again really great at just using the content that they have. I think for a really long time, for a software company in the marketing industry, they published very little content. I think that up until they recently reached this scaling point lately, which is probably because it's what their marketing needed, they were publishing, I think, bi-weekly for a while. Mm-hmm. Meaning twice a month, that bi-weekly, not the other bi-weekly. So they were publishing twice a month. And so, for the marketing industry, for content marketers, that's so little. And then another example, but, they were then spending the rest of their time still working on content marketing, just not publishing. They were, getting those views. They were creating those YouTube videos. And then another similar example, similar industry also, is Brian Dean. I know that he has ramped up the content creation more lately, but for so many years of Backlinko's existence, he had less than a dozen blog posts on his site. Right. And each of those blog posts was updated and totally remixed every year. And so I definitely love that approach. Let me think. And I mean, I will give Gary Vee credit that that what he's doing is right for his business model. It's just not an accurate picture of, of product or, brand marketing.
Yeah. I love that. I love that Brian Dean example too, because he really does span the spectrum of content. He will take something like a course and then he'll break it down into articles. He'll turn it into tweets. He'll make emails out of it. He really squeezes all the value he possibly can out of that initial seed piece of content.
Exactly. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. Awesome. Well, we're kind of coming up here on our hour. So first of all, I just want to say thank you again, Brittany, for your time. It was amazing to hear from you and some amazing ideas and inspiration in your workshop there. Do you want to give everyone kind of a quick plug here, maybe where they can check you out or follow you or find you online?
Yeah, sure. You can check me out at brittanyberger.com. Be sure to check out the Remix Planner on that site. It is the big content repurposing calendar tool, and there's no Notion version yet, but that's coming, and there's an Airtable version, and there's also just a free cheat sheet to help you think about how to incorporate repurposing into your overall marketing strategy.
Amazing. Yeah, and like I said, I can vouch. I did get the Notion training as well. So Brittany does some amazing work there with resources and training. So shout out to that. One final plug here. If you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel and stay up to date. We've got more workshops and Q&As coming. And check out Top of the Funnel. It's yesoptimist.com/tofu. Thank you so much, and thanks again, Brittany, for your time. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.